In our previous lessons during Unit 5, we've been talking about finding the fraction of a number and how fraction or how of is also related to multiplication. We're going to take it the next step today, and we're going to talk about finding a fraction of another fraction, or how we're going to start the process of multiplying two fractions together. For today, we're going to be practicing drawing a picture to show why, when you multiply fractions together, you get the answer that you do. Our first sample problem is going to be 1/2 of 3/4, and to start with, we've got a rectangle here, and I'm going to divide that into fourths. I'm going to divide it into fourths. That line's a little crazy, and so this will be our 1/4, 2/4, and 3/4. Now I'm going to find half of what 3/4 is, and to do that, I'm going to switch colors here. And notice, originally our lines were going horizontally. Now we're going to make it go vertically. And we're going to separate this now into half. Then we're going to shade in half of our original rectangle. Now the next step is to trace around the portion that has both colors in it. We're going to trace around the portion that has both colors in it. And you can see that three squares have both colors in it, and their total are 8 squares. And that's how we get our fraction. For our next sample problem, let's try 2/3 of 3/5. Oops. 2/3 of 3/5. And ultimately, because of the turnaround method, it doesn't matter which one we do first. When we multiply numbers, it doesn't matter what order you do it in, you're still going to get the same answer. But I'm going to start with this second problem here, 3/5. So I'll divide my whole piece into 3/5. And ultimately, it doesn't matter if I start with horizontal lines or vertical lines. I just typically start this way. So I've got it divided into fifths. I'm actually going to make my last one a little bit better here, so they're a little bit more evenly spaced. So 3/5, and I'm going to represent 3/5 by shading that in. Now I have my 3/5 represented, and my next step is to find 2/3. My next step is to find 2/3 of those 3/5. So again, I'm going to grab a different color here, and now I have to draw my lines vertically, and I'm going to split the whole rectangle into thirds. I'm going to split the whole rectangle into thirds. When I shade in, I like to shade in the whole part. We wouldn't necessarily have to do that. We'd only really have to shade in the portion of the 3/5 because we're just finding the fraction of the 3/5. But I'm going to go ahead and shade in the whole amount. So I've shaded in 2/3 of the whole rectangle, and I now want to find out what 2/3 of the 3/5 is. 2/3 of the 3/5. So again, I'm gonna trace around the portion that has both colors in it, because this portion is showing me what 2/3 of the 3/5 represents. And if I count all the pieces in that section, there are 6 pieces. There are 6 pieces. And now I have to figure out how many pieces are in the whole rectangle. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. I have 15 total pieces. So you can see that 2/3 of 3/5 ends up being 6/15. 6/15. And just one more thing about how we've been working through these fractions. Remember, fractions of a fraction or fraction of a whole number is the same thing as doing a multiplication problem. So we have 2/3 of 3/5 equals 2/3 times 3/5. And in this case, 2/3 times 3/5 ends up being 6/15. We can stop there, or we could take it on and put it in simplest form. And just for an example of simplest form, both 6 and 15 can be divided by 3. 6 divided by 3 is 2, and 15 divided by 3 is 5. So in simplest form, it'd be 2/5. In our classroom, for these problems, 6/15 would be an appropriate answer, or an acceptable answer. So in our next lessons, we're going to take this a step further and work on more of an algorithm for solving these multiplication problems. But this shows you why, when you multiply 2 fractions together, this shows you why you get the answer that you do get. Make sure you let your teacher know if you have any questions, and we'll see you in our next video.